There we go. All right, we are recording. Welcome everybody to November's Beyond the Track meeting. As usual, I run through an introduction, give folks some extra time to join in, as well. Have some background information for those who watch these videos later. This may be the very first video that you're watching, so I want to make sure that you know what these things are all about, and you get to know a little bit more about the folks who are talking here and the things that we actually do at Beyond the Track. So first, some quick introductions. I'm Claudio La Sala. On the internet, you find Instagram, YouTube. I have a 3-Lap Rider account where I put my track footage and photos from the track and stuff like that. I've been riding on the street for a long time, on the track, very recent as of 2017. Usually I do a lot of the talking here, but I always make sure to let people know, look, I'm still a beginner. I'm still trying to figure this stuff out. And, usually what I share, it's the stuff that I just learned, or maybe a couple of months ago I've learned, and I feel like sharing. But, once in a while, we do manage to get, folks who know way more than I do about everything that we talk here, like it's the case tonight. And but I want to always put things into perspective, right? I always take my stuff, my words with a grain of salt. Big thanks to the BTT supporters on Patreon. You guys keep us going, encouraging us to, just keep the meetings going and doing things like, getting nice t-shirts with a nice logo on it, banners and cards that we give away at the tracks when we're networking with folks. And that way we can keep a tight group together of like-minded track riders. And the folks who are joining in during the meeting, as well as folks who watch these videos later. I'm always so happy every time that I'm at the track and there's somebody who walks up to me and say, "Oh, you're the guy from those videos. Yeah, thanks for putting those up." And it's like, that's why, I keep doing these things, because of this community that we keep growing. It's very rewarding. So what is the Beyond the Track? So years ago when I was packing up, my stuff at the track, I'm driving back home and I think, I would love to be riding more. Right? It's awesome, but I cannot ride every day. That's not what I do for a living. So what else could I do beyond the track to improve my riding? Hence the Beyond the Track, which was created as just a series of monthly meetings that started, growing again a community. So we get together at the track and we get together off track to exchange experiences, the things that we are learning the hard way. Sometimes, learning through crashes and broken bones. So let's try to prevent those from happening by sharing our lessons to others so that they don't run into the same problems. They will be running into problems of their own, but at least if they run into the same problems that we have, they can get prepared for it, right? And maybe try to avoid. So, of course, we started this as an in-presence meeting. And, with pandemic and all, we started doing this virtually, and it will continue on being a virtual meeting, until we can actually safely be in the same places together. We have a bunch of meeting videos. So ever since 2018, when we started these meetings, on a monthly basis, we have almost like 40 hours worth of free content up there. You go on the website and you see all of the videos that we've put out that goes from preparing for your very first track day ever, going through how to use action cameras, how to do data analysis using your lap timers and things like that, how to ride when it's like extremely hot outside and things like that, that normally you don't think about it because you just want to ride. Well, the rest of us thinking about those things and, taking good care of actually sharing those with others, it proves to be very helpful. We also have a Patreon website where you can, help out so that we can keep this initiative and these efforts going. There are different tiers that you can contribute there. And it will also give access to the website where we have a members only area with tools to help riders manage, their cost tracking, because it's very expensive, right, this sport. So the better you understand where your money is going, the better you can optimize that, and then the more riding you get to go, right? You get to do. So we have tools out there for that. We have tools for like checklists. You don't want to prepare, get all excited to go to the track and ride, and then you make it out there and you forgot the keys to your bike, or you forgot your tire warmers, or you forgot whatever it is that may get you concerned, preoccupied, as opposed to, get to do your riding. So having checklists have been very useful. Putting together track day plans. So before going out to the track, figure out what are you going to be working on? What are the specific aspects of your riding that you're going to be working on? Think through it. Watch your own videos or watch other riders' videos. Put down some notes. Draw a plan. Get to the track. Stick to that plan. Take notes. Once you're back home, do your track day debrief. Like, put out your notes, compare that with your own onboard footage, see what the lessons learned are, figure out what are the areas that you can work on next time. So it's a nice way to track all of those things in a single spot. So the topic for tonight, wet track. So if you go back to February of 2018, in that meeting, that was the second BTT meeting ever. I actually shared my own experience riding at a track the first time, and that was in 2017. That was my fourth track day, and I approached it from the standpoint of, I've been riding on the street for over 25 years, growing up in Brazil, riding a bike in Brazil. Some of the streets there were still cobblestone, and then you get like a lot of rain on it, like this much of rain, and you're riding your bike on that. And I did a lot of that back in the day. No big deal. I thought I have experience with that. So how different is it going to be riding at the track when it's raining? Well, that day I got to experience that. It felt very different from riding on the street, on a wet street. I'm guessing, and then Shaun will be able to tell me if I'm too far off or not. But I think like the track that I rode was MSR Houston, and I'm thinking maybe the kind of like the oil and the grease and whatever is on the track when it's wet. It's a different kind of feel than you get on a wet road, right? On a wet street. So that's what I felt. It didn't feel that great, but at no point I felt in danger. But of course, I was also going really, really slow because it's very different from a dry track. Fast forward to 2018, late 2018, I had the opportunity to ride again on a wet track, raining a lot, but running rain tires at Sachsenring in Germany, where the surface is just out of this world. It was a completely different experience. I actually felt just totally safe. I felt like I was going fast, even though it was pretty wet. But that's a different kind of track with a much better track surface, which does compare to the track that we've been talking about here in Texas called Eagles Canyon, right? That, the track has been rebuilt, not just resurfaced. And that's the kind of traction that I felt riding in Germany. So that was my experience this far with riding in the rain. And it's a topic that comes up quite frequently, right? How do you ride to the available traction? How do you feel that? So, lucky enough for us, many years ago, in 2017, actually, as I was doing my research to learn about track riding, I found 2 blog posts about riding in the rain or experiences. How do you learn from it? And you fast forward that, I ended up, meeting the author of those blog posts and ended up getting coached by him first in 2018 and then second time just 2 or 3 weeks ago. And Shaun actually, was kind enough to let me, re-upload these blog posts under the BTT website so that it's available again for folks. I've added here also, if you look him up on YouTube, his channel is really cool. He has a lot of great stuff there. And when he's doing coaching, he uses in-helmet communication systems so that he can communicate with the other riders. And we get to learn from those. So make sure to check it out. And without further ado, Shaun, thank you so much, man, for joining us. The floor is all yours.
Well, thank you. Very glad to talk. Oh dear, I've got a terrible feedback happening.
Okay, let's see. Move it so my
What can I do to fix that? I don't
wonder
know
if
if
it's
it's my
coming
headset
from-
or not. I haven't used this one in a long time.
Okay.
Testing.
Okay.
I don't know
Guys,
if this is on my end or yours.
Yeah, so I muted myself for like 30 seconds. Did that make any better?
Okay. Yes, that's, oh, no, it's still here. It's a really delayed feedback. It comes back like 2 or 3 seconds. Although, no, that's fixed it. Okay, it's gone. Okay.
Actually, yeah, you got it fixed. I unmuted myself just to see if that would work. So, yep, you're good. You should be good, Shaun.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so yeah, thank you, Claudio. I was very glad to see that some people were reading my blogs and actually appreciating the feedback that I was trying to give. That's back when I was working for RideSmart, and I was putting in a blog post a week and just writing about the experiences I had while teaching. And yeah, I was fortunate to be able to ride in the rain because it reminded me of several classes I had back when I was racing. For anyone who actually did read the blogs that Claudio posted, I raced two-stroke 250s back in the early 90s for a few years. And both shortly before I started racing and while I was racing, I took as many advanced rider classes as I possibly could because I knew how much I had to learn. And because of the fact that it's in the Southern Hemisphere, we race during winter. So summer's all very hot, but then we stop racing around the October, November timeframe. And that means that, yeah, we're racing all through winter. So racing in the rain was not at all uncommon. And I was glad that I had the experience taking those classes in the rain because it overemphasized the importance for riding smoothly. And I guess I take a similar approach to Claudio. I would analyze everything I could. I'd get home from a race or get home from a track school and write down as many notes as I possibly could about what I'd learned, because one thing I didn't like to do was to simply spend a lot of money and lap at a track day or at a practice day, we called them back then, or at a race or at a school, and not actually have something quantifiable to improve. So I would fill my logbook with settings, I'd fill them with lap times, and I didn't have a digital camera back then. This was the early 90s. So I would take notes of tire pressures and describe the condition of the tires in addition to other aspects of the track, whether it was a repaired section that was causing problems or yeah, basically just describing the asphalt. So yeah, when I was riding at Texas World, it was back in I think 2014 or 15. I was in level 2 and had a class where only one person out of the 20 or so students actually wanted to go onto the track. And I had said, you know, if anyone's interested, I think it's a great idea to ride in the rain. You learn a lot because you have to. It forces you to learn. It forces you to use good habits. It forces you to not ride recklessly. And one person said, yeah, I'd like to. So it was a very interesting experience because, as I mentioned, he was forced to put into practice all the lessons that we'd been preaching in class. And he did so very well. He overemphasized all of the good aspects of riding that can make you fast, whether it's wet or not. It doesn't matter if you've got perfectly dry asphalt. You still don't want to ride aggressive or overly aggressively. You don't want to be over emphasizing throttle and brake use because that's just not good technique. You can't ride quickly if you don't ride smoothly first. And riding in the rain just really forces you to use those good habits and techniques. So it was a great experience both for me and for the student. There were a couple of times, I think it was a GSXR 750, and I was on my Aprilia, and there were times when I was in front and doing what I could to test out my traction limits. For example, that bike I was on has ABS, and I could feel it starting to kick in when I was coming into, let's see, I think it was turn 10, where you've got to go over a slight rise, and then it's a 180-degree turn to the right. and I'd be braking in preparation for this turn, and I could feel the lever starting to pulse. So that was it sensing the front wheel starting to lose traction. Okay, well, that's good to know. That's where the limit is. And then coming out of the corners, feeding in the throttle smoothly, but then also progressively more and more throttle. So I'm being smooth, but I'm also adding progressively more aggression to the application of throttle. So testing the limits, both of the front end and the rear tire as well. And after a lap or two, I waved the student by and started to watch what he was doing. So because I had the center communicators on, I was able to say to him, okay, now let's experiment with how much traction you can feel on the rear tire. So coming out of a corner, he'd apply the throttle, and I could see that it wasn't spinning. And so I said, okay, coming out of the next corner, give it some more throttle. Just see how it feels. Don't give it an entire handful, but just be progressively more aggressive with that throttle application. So just because it is wet, it's not reason to panic. It's not reason to pack up and go home. A wet track is a fantastic learning opportunity. And if riding on the track at all is good fun because of the reasons we've all experienced, no traffic, good surface, everyone's going in the same direction, well, what difference is there in the rain? It's still the same benefits all still apply. And the added benefit of reduction of traction can actually be a great lesson. So having talked about all of that, I was wondering if anyone had any questions or points or comments to make.
I'll jump in and have one. So I've never ridden a bike that had any kind of electronic aid, so like no ABS. Does it vary, like how to sense or how to feel the available traction when you don't have ABS, versus having it?
Well, the difference is that the system can detect smaller amounts of wheel slip than I can. So it had multiple modes in the ABS, and the rain mode changes all of the power application and the brake application. So I was in rain mode, of course, and I was able to go from maximum ABS sensitivity all the way down to minimum ABS sensitivity. And it was still able to sense the wheel slippage or wheel sliding before I could. So for example, that same day, I jumped off the Aprilia and jumped onto my Supermoto, which actually had rain tires. And on that thing, with of course no ABS at all, it's just a dirt bike with 17-inch wheels, I was able to brake harder and harder throughout a lap until I reached the point where the tires started to slip. And that is where it actually just turned back into a dirt bike. It was exactly the same as if I was riding on dirt, where I'm progressively squeezing the lever, and then I can feel it's kind of a vagueness in the bars, where instead of feeling the minute vibration, all of a sudden there's nothing. And that's at the point where you let go of the lever and you get that sensation back. You get the feel of traction back at the bars. Oh, are you still there, Claudio? My screen froze up.
Shaun, this is Michael here. I still have audio if Claudio doesn't.
Okay.
I do have a question for you on this topic.
Sure thing.
One of the things I was thinking about when you say you're letting go of the brake lever at that point, am I presuming that you're still trail braking at that point? Or are you more upright? Again, you're riding supermoto style, I guess, might be one way to describe it. But are you changing how you're trail braking in the wet? And talk about that a little bit
definitely.
more.
Absolutely. Yeah. So trail braking requires an immense amount of feel. It's something that I could honestly say I'm still learning about, because trail braking can be such a huge benefit that doing it well can make the difference between catching someone quickly or watching them waltz off into the distance. So In the rain, yes, it's very different than it is in the dry. So for example, if I'm riding a sport bike in the rain, I will still trail brake, but not nearly to the same extent as I would if it was dry. So I'll approach the corner, I'll do the vast majority of my braking while completely upright, and I'll use the trail braking to continue to load weight onto the front tire. So for example, if I'm trying to go quickly versus just trying to ride smoothly, then yeah, I'll brake as hard as I can. I'll ease off the brake lever as I start adding lean. I'll always do this, whether it's dry or wet, but I'll be reducing the braking force a lot more as I lean in, because of course you've got less traction to play with, so you can't be as aggressive on the brake lever. But all the same techniques still apply. You cannot add lean and brake at the same time. That's the cardinal rule. You cannot add brake and lean at the same time. You can only do one or the other. So in the wet, if I'm coming into a corner, if I would normally ease off 50% of my braking in the dry, then in the wet, I'll probably ease off 75% of my braking. So I'm reducing the amount of trail braking, but not necessarily reducing the amount of time that I'm trail braking for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you're reaching the apex or slightly before you're letting off the brake pressure. So the timing and the extent on the track when you're executing those actions don't change. It's just the magnitude of the input that you're putting into the bike that you're modulating and controlling there.
Correct. Now, I'll be applying the brake at the same time, but because I'm applying less brake while leaned over, then that means I'll be off the brake earlier. But at the same time, that also means that I'll be on the gas earlier as well. Because, I mean, there can sometimes, rarely, be a moment when you're actually trail braking while you're getting onto the gas. But of course, that'll never happen while you're riding in the rain. But because it's wet, because you have less traction, then yes, I'll be off the brake earlier than I would be if it was dry.
Gotcha. So the other thing, when you're reaching the apex and you're starting to feel for traction, are you more preoccupied with it breaking traction or feeling that edge when it starts to slip so that you can control it? One of the things that I become preoccupied with is at the apex at lean, whether it's wet or dry, is starting to feel that I'm trying to prevent it from slipping. Whereas some of the topics we've been talking about lately are learning to be comfortable with it slipping or even slipping it intentionally. When you're in the rain, what are you most concerned with to control that, to prevent bad things from happening? Or is it like a case-by-case basis that maybe it's not preventing it from slipping, or maybe your approach to getting it to slip is a little bit different?
Yeah. It is definitely a case-by-case basis. So there are different situations. And also, I had the benefit of my childhood friend. I knew him since we were 7 years old. We raced together. We're still good friends. He was fascinating to watch. In the race, in the rain, he would intentionally slip the front wheel. He would do it on purpose because he said, how else can I know that I can't go any faster without slipping? So that's what he would do. Me personally, I wasn't comfortable doing that. So I would have a slower top speed, slower entry speed, corner entry speed, a slower mid-corner speed, and a slower exit speed. But I would also crash less. So that's the sort of the toss-up. You have to make that decision. Which one do you want? So for me personally, it would be a matter of trying to get close to the limit without crossing it. Whereas other people who just have the natural understanding of what that is will intentionally cross that threshold where they know that they've lost traction, but they're good at getting it back. Now, having said that, it's very easy to get close to the limit without crossing it. It's a lot harder to cross it and then not crash. So that's a decision each individual rider has to make for themselves. So for me, I'm not going to talk for anyone else, but for me personally, I would much rather slow down a little sacrifice some corner speed and have a higher chance of finishing a race than will then ride at 102 or 105%, because the risk of not finishing the race is much higher. But that's a personal attitude. That's a personal approach. So for me personally, what I would do is I would use the most emphasizing of riding position that I possibly could. I would literally push the bike away from me in the corner. I would stand it up as high as possible and use good technique as best I possibly could. Head turn through the corner, look at the apex, look at the next aim point, and then apply throttle smoothly. It was only if I made a mistake that I would find that the front had slipped. Now, having said that, there were a few times when it did let go, when I did actually exceed the limits and didn't crash. Now, those were memorable, that's for sure, but also it was a large result of practice from dirt bike riding, because on a dirt bike, it's basically riding in the rain all the time, just 100% riding in the rain, because you have a much lower level of grip available. So you just become comfortable with the sensation of the front sliding through a corner. You become comfortable with the sensation of the rear breaking loose at any time. So there are a number of times I can remember from racing and from teaching here in Texas when the front would let go, and I was aware of it. And the key is to not panic. If you do find that you've exceeded your limits and you've lost traction, then the last thing you want to do is slam the throttle closed. You do not want to do that. The last thing you want to do is hit your brakes because you think you're out of control. The key on motorcycles almost every time is smoothness. So in the second blog, I was writing about the sensation of riding down turn 2 at Coda, and I felt that vagueness hit the handlebars very quickly, very suddenly. And I thought, okay, I'm now sliding the front end. And at this point, this is when your brain compresses time. And it probably only happened for less than a second. But in my mind, looking back at it or thinking back at it, it felt quite a long period of time. So I'm turning down the corner. I'm realizing, okay, I'm using the right body position, but I've still lost the front. So I'm not going to panic. The last thing you want to do is suddenly do anything. It might have been something you've done in the past, like push the rear brake. Don't do anything suddenly. So instead, I stayed light on the bars. I didn't grab onto them like a handrail. I didn't quickly shut the throttle. I didn't do anything abruptly. That's the key to staying upright in a situation like that. And the only I could possibly suggest is on a dirt bike, when you lose traction on the rear, you literally push your body weight back and the redistribution will actually give you traction. If you're coming into a corner and you think you might lose traction, then you push all your body weight forwards. What else is happening, though, is your body is becoming accustomed to all the other sensations and all the other things that it can do to stay upright in that situation. So it's not something you can be consciously aware of. It's just your body reacting. You're training your reflexes. So the only thing to do that, or to get that, is practice. And that's why I was saying to the students at Texas World, if it's raining, that's a fantastic opportunity. Every chance you get, ride in the rain. It'll teach your body what it needs to do. And then when it's called upon to do it, it happens automatically. You cannot think about it. You don't have time to think about what to do. But if you've trained your body to react in the right way, then it will do it without even thinking.
So one of the things, talking about the reaction, I'm thinking of leaning the bike into the corner in the wet, in the dry, whatever. When the front wheel starts to slide, there's one of the things that jumps out at me is training myself to react appropriately to that. So when I crash, because I've slid the front, because I haven't mastered that skill, the first thing I notice is the bars will suddenly go to full lock. And the question is, when that happens, it's pretty significant. You do notice suddenly the steering position has changed.
Yes.
And so what I think I need to do, and correct me if I'm wrong to get me on the right track, is to straighten that front wheel again. But that action of straightening the front wheel is essentially counter steering the motorcycle, because the direction you have to rotate it in that corner is essentially counter steering. But the thing is, you've lost the front. Your bike is now going to full lean, like on the side of the bike, because you crashed. And it's counterintuitive to me to think that to correct the situation, I actually need to counter steer, which under normal traction conditions means I would be steering even tighter into the corner. So steering more into the corner to fix the slide and arrest my lean angle, unintended lean angle.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how I learned that, or if that's the right approach. How do you catch that when it suddenly goes to full lock? I have been able to catch it before, where I'm feeling that the steering lightens, like you're riding on ice. You can feel it's kind of numb and vague, like you described. But I haven't had that big steering angle deflection because the bars moved a lot. My experience so far has been, when I detect the bars have moved a lot, they've moved so far that I'm not going to recover from it.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, if you find that you're on the track and your bars have reached full lock, the chances of you catching it and recovering from that are, well, they're pretty slim. I can remember one time watching MotoGP, and Colin Edwards was racing for the Yamaha team, and he had that happen. He lost the front, went down, and actually caught it. He rescued his slide. Now, if a rider of Colin Edwards' caliber can do that and still be shocked and amazed, like he was literally amazed, because he stood up on the bars and said to the crowd, like he waved to the crowd, "Oh my God, did you see what I just did? That's amazing."
No problem.
If someone like him can be surprised at catching that slide, then the chances of us doing it are pretty minimal. What I would say instead is train your body to how that feels. Now, I've actually done this multiple times, both intentionally and unintentionally, but this is an exercise that I first did at a racer school. And it might sound a little extreme, but here goes anyway. So the coaches told us, we want you to go down the straight at, in kilometers, it was, I think they said 100 kilometers an hour. So that's about 60 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Go down the straight at 60 miles an hour. Get loose on the bars, loose on the seat, light weight on the seat. So just lift your butt off so it's just gently grazing the seat. And for just an instant, just a moment, grab that brake as hard as you possibly can and intentionally lock the front wheel at 60 miles an hour. Now that sounds extreme. It sounded extreme to me back when I did it, but I did do it. And I got an idea of what it feels like for the front to slide at high speed. So yes, I did grab the front brake at
Shaun,
60 miles an hour on a track.
Shaun, I'm
Yes,
so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Can you repeat that drill, just because I wanted to make sure I captured for Garrett?
Yes.
Because that's what we're all about. It's just pushing that limit. So if you could please repeat that. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so here's the drill, the exercise that I did and have done multiple times. 60 miles an hour, light grip on the bars, light weight on the seat. At 60 miles an hour, grab the front brake as hard as you can, just for an instant. And then release it straight away. What'll happen is you'll hear the tire squeal. You'll feel the bars come almost to the lock, but then when you release the brake, they will go straight again. And that is the equivalent of feeling the wheel lose traction in the wet and then regain traction. So I did that multiple times in that particular session, 60 miles an hour down the main straight, grab the brake just for an instant. You hear the tire squeal, You feel the bars flick to one side or the other, because it will go to a random direction, left or right, depending. And then release the brake as soon as you can. It'll scare you. You'll feel your heart really start to race, but then you'll realize, oh, hey, I survived. That wasn't so bad. And then next lap, do the same thing again. Now, I don't necessarily recommend doing this every track day or every session, but do it often enough to get yourself accustomed to the sensation. We're literally training our bodies on what to expect and how to react when it happens. So, for example, for me, at the time I was still riding on the street, I was racing on, usually once a month, and then riding to work during the week. There was one time I was riding to work, I wasn't paying attention properly. I saw a car in front of me slowing down more quickly than I expected. I grabbed the brake, trying to avoid hitting that car, and the front locked. I thought, oh, I know what this is like. I eased off the brake and then reapplied very quickly. And it was as if nothing had happened. It was just a normal run-of-the-mill encounter because my body was accustomed to the sensation. I knew what would happen. I knew what had happened when it happened, and I knew how to react. I knew how to recover, and it was no big deal. So that sort of thing, you have to train your body how to react, and that is one really good way to do it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate that comment there. When you're hitting the brake quick, obviously we're not getting the weight transfer, so you're not getting the traction out of the front tire, and that helps it to actually lock. But I'm also wondering, you said you didn't know which direction the bike might want to steer under that application. Do you find that you're grabbing the brake, essentially you're snatching the brake, which is what you should never do to stop effectively. But for this exercise, did you find the way you're snatching the brake actually puts a steering input that is what's causing it to go to one side or the other?
Yeah. If you find that when you do this exercise, it always pulls to the right, then that's implying that you're yanking on the lever instead of squeezing it.
Yes.
That implies that you're using your entire arms to brake and not just your hand. So that's a good way to find a bad technique.
Yeah, to assess your own behavior there. I like that.
Yes.
It's actually accomplishing two different things from that same drill.
Yes.
That's awesome. I love that.
So for anyone who... sorry.
Shaun, I have a quick question for you. Can you do that exercise in the dry, or is it just like an exercise that you can do in the wet? Because I might actually try that.
It's absolutely doable in both the wet and the dry. Okay. So let's see. For the first time I ever did it was in the dry, and that's why we heard that loud tire squeal, because it was leaving. We were leaving 10-foot long black lines on the track every time it was done.
All right, cool. I'm gonna try that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Just for an instant, though. Remember, just for an instant.
Yeah. Don't just grab the brake and hold it.
That's right.
Thanks, Shaun. I now, as a dad, have gray hairs, even more.
But the thing is that the benefits are significant.
Oh, incredibly.
When your body understands what's going on, it's no panic. It's no emergency. Your body says, oh, I know what this is. I know how to react, and instantly does what it needs to do. And you get fewer heart palpitations as a result.
Yeah, the reason I kind of focused on that, asked you to repeat that, is because when Garrett started riding, and I put him on a bike when he was 7 years old, he was doing high chair wheelies on a Z125. And I said, and when the police start showing up at your house enough times, you say, okay, you know what, it's time to put him on the track. And I realized really quick that this kid is going to benefit most, especially from talking to kids like Cody Kitchens, and several other wonderful kids out there over the past course this year, is those extreme drills. If you really want to get that edge, and that sits in a muscle memory, And that's exactly why
Yes.
I wanted him to. But that doesn't mean that it's any less stressful for me as a father. But
True, absolutely.
So one of the other things I was thinking about, Shaun, riding in the wet, is line selection. And I haven't ridden a lot in the wet, but I'm certainly, if it's raining, I will go out, no hesitation. Track time is precious, and I will not give it away unless it's life-threatening, like lightning or something. But the other thing I notice is I'm not always riding a world-class, freshly paved track in the wet. And I do tend to choose lines based on what the surface conditions are. By that, I mean standing water, for example.
Right.
When you're riding a track and trying to select a line, it looks like a glassy lake when there's standing water, and you don't know what the surface is under that water. You just lost all your reference point, right? It's a piece of glass.
Yeah.
So talk about some of those choices about potentially aquaplaning, because if the surface is wet and you can see the surface, it's slippery. However, if you're on a straightaway at NOLA going into the first turn and it's literally a lake out there, you talk about riding along and not being able to feel what the front tire is doing because it's not in contact with the ground. I definitely noticed running through standing water where two things would happen. Just going in a straight line, accelerating, the bike will noticeably slow because it's plowing through water, and you also may feel the tires sliding sideways. What's the balance to doing that safely because of that challenge? The other thing is just the hydroplaning. I don't know when the onset is, how fast you have to be going for that to happen. But what would be your approach in that situation when you may not be able to see the surface of the track because we're talking about standing water?
Yeah. Aquaplaning is a whole different level of risk. Most tracks have drainage systems that don't allow standing water, and most racing organizations will cancel any race, even a wet race that has been called as a wet race. They'll cancel if there is standing water, because aquaplaning is very dangerous. There's almost nothing you can do to save an aquaplane. Fortunately, motorcycles have much less chance of aquaplaning compared to cars because we have much less tire in contact with the track. But if you're in a race and you have standing water, then any self-respecting, the CMRA would definitely cancel a race where there was extensive standing water. So that's kind of a moot point. It's really not worth even dealing with because there's almost nothing you can do. Literally, your bike is now waterborne. It's not touching the track. There's nothing you can do. Yeah, so I wouldn't even worry about how to deal with aquaplaning because, if you're in a race, it'll get cancelled. If you're on the street, that's the speeds are so much lower that we don't really have to worry about it. And if you're at a track day, any self-respecting track day would cancel the day if there was standing water on a track because that should not happen.
Yeah. Because I remember being at NOLA riding in the rain and the front straight was just covered with water. There was 30-foot rooster tail would come off your bike going down the straight, and it was, let's keep the speed lower so gravity is overcoming the aquaplaning force. But it was interesting to ride the track because I would literally, anywhere there was standing water, I would find higher ground on the track, and I had really, really weird lines on the track. It's the only time I've ever ridden that track. So I don't have a feel for what a normal day is on that track. But my approach was just avoid the standing water if at all possible, especially in corners. So, okay, I didn't know if there was another strategy for handling that, and that was just open riding on a track in that particular day. So, your comments about an actual race are entirely spot on.
Yeah, that does bring up another good point, though. Choosing your line based on the color of the asphalt it's not beneficial. The best line around the track is not the one that avoids the the patches or the rubber or the what do they call them? The tar snakes. You
Oh.
want to avoid seams in the asphalt, like at Crescent, there's multiple seams. At MSRH, there's a few seams that you want to avoid. But don't choose your line around the track based on imperfections in the asphalt, unless it's Eagles Canyon 3 years ago, which we don't have to worry about anymore.
Yeah.
The best line through the track is the best line through the track. You'll find that the really quick riders don't try to avoid that little patch here or there. They don't try to avoid that squiggly bit of tar snake. They just go on the line that is the most efficient and the most effective. So that's what you should use as the basis for choosing your line, not the actual imperfections on the track. Now, having said that, yeah, if there's a sinkhole, of course, yeah, you want to go around that. I was at Harris Hill a few years ago, and there literally was a sinkhole in the track. They put up some cones, but they said in the morning rider briefing, "Look, sorry, but this sinkhole opened up just the other day. Don't go into it." Oh, gee, thanks. That's good advice. Okay, I'll try to avoid it. It was more than a few feet deep, but don't pick your line based on the color of the asphalt.
Awesome. I appreciate that feedback because we do look at the track and yes. and then you
Eagles
actually
Canyon,
walk out, then you realize it's actually grippier than you gave it credit for.
Exactly. And Eagles Canyon was pretty extreme, but that's not a problem anymore, thankfully. So a track walk is a great opportunity because that'll give you a chance to literally get down on your hands and knees and say, okay, is this little blemish, is this little imperfection worth avoiding? Is it worth sacrificing your lean angle for? And the answer is almost invariably no. Just treat it like another part of the track, or any other part of the track, I should say.
Another topic, talking about cornering on, various traction surfaces. One of the things I try to focus on is turning the bike quickly, minimizing the amount of time you're at lean. Keith Code has replied on this one over and over. You cannot turn the bike too quickly, talking about traction, unless you're on ice. Does that play? A lot of that in wet conditions for me is a psychological situation, trying to overcome that. Well, developing better habits to overcome your natural predisposition to doing things like that. Any nuances that you might want to share on trying to turn the bike quickly at turn in? And have you ever actually run into a condition where you can actually turn it so fast that the front tire slides at the tip-in point, for example, because you turned it so fast? I will say I've attempted that before. I've never run into that as a problem. I haven't disproven that theory. Just wondering if there are any special cases where that might actually happen.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And the sensation of turning the bike quickly as possible can feel very aggressive because you're counter steering. And this is one case where dirt bike riding, for me personally, has been an immense learning tool, because there have been a number of times when I'm literally trying to go through a dogleg corner as quickly as I possibly can. So I'm adding progressively more and more counter steering effort, because the less time you spend leaned, or the less time you spend turning, gives you more time accelerating, because that's the key. You cannot accelerate while you're turning, at least transitioning. The quicker you can turn, the earlier you can accelerate. And that's what Keith Code's talking about. So get your turning done as quickly as possible, and you'll spend more time accelerating. So yes, it does require a lot of aggression in your counter steer. So you are coming up to a corner, you're done with your braking, you want to get that bike turned as quickly as possible. So if you're, say, for example, doing a left-hand turn, you give a big push on that inside handlebar, and the bike will just drop down quickly. You're done, you're accelerating through the corner, and then you're done turning. You now want to counter steer again. So while you're leaned, you push on the outside bar as hard as you dare. And yeah, can feel counterintuitive to steer into the corner, but by doing so, you will flick the bike upright really quickly. And that's all that you want to do. You want to get that bike onto its side as quickly as possible. You want to get it off its side as quickly as possible, because that allows you to get onto the gas as quickly as possible. So this brings up an example that I was doing. I was having some experience dirt bike racing. There was 4 or 5 of us circulating this road race style track on dirt, and the person who could get their steering done as quickly as possible would be the one who could pass other riders down the straight. We were all on 250s, and it was a case of doing a short, very quick dog leg corner before a long straight. And I was finding that I was counter steering so aggressively that the front wheel would literally leave the ground in that transition. And because I was on the gas at that point, coming out of the corner, it didn't really matter. I mean, I could feel the handlebars get a little loose as I'm counter steering, but as a result of that really aggressive counter steer, I was able to get on the gas earlier. So again, this is something I wouldn't necessarily recommend for wet riding, which is a whole nother subject, but in order to minimize turning time, it's going to take a lot of aggression on your counter steering inputs.
Yeah.
It's something that happens with practice. It takes practice, and you've got to be prepared to push your boundaries. Just put in progressively more and more pounds of force into the handlebars during your counter steering effort.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, because that is one thing I do notice visually on other riders when I'm on the track and it's wet, and the turn-in rate slows down. Really, everything slows down because the speeds slow down, and naturally, the speed slows down. Yes, your turn-in rate naturally slows down as well. But I think in some cases, what I've observed is being careful out there tends to back off certain inputs, and turn-in rate seems to be one I notice more than anything else. And I also tend to notice when the rider isn't turning the bike in quickly enough, they also tend to run a little wider because you know, they're not used to that pace. And again, if you don't turn it and get it turned, it's going to have a greater tendency to go wide coming out,
Right.
which causes other anxiety in the rider.
Sure.
So
yeah, because you want to spend as little time as possible leaned over.
yeah.
The less lean you have, the faster you can go, and the less time you spent leaning means the faster you can go. So even though that's my personal favorite, I mean, that's one of the reasons I ride a motorcycle is because I can enjoy the feeling of leaning. It is not conducive to good lap times. So the quicker you can get onto the side and then off the side of the tire, the better your lap times will be.
Awesome. Good advice. I appreciate it. Hey, another riding in the rain that I have noticed issues with, completely unrelated to the motorcycle's traction on the track, is my personal contact points with the motorcycle, the control inputs. One of the ones that jumps out to me is foot pegs. We often have metal foot pegs, no rubber on the pegs. Boots on metal pegs in the wet don't have necessarily great traction. And I have had situations where I'm cornering and my foot comes off the peg kind of thing, or moves around a little bit. What considerations do you put into your bike prep or setup in the rain to help you maintain contact with the bike so you have better control input? Foot pegs is just the most obvious example that comes to my mind, but I also notice that my contact of the knee on the tank is something that may slide around a little bit more and be less well controlled when things are wet, especially if I'm wearing a rain suit, for example, to keep my leathers from becoming a chamois and gaining 20 pounds of water weight. Then I noticed that my position on the motorcycle is more likely to change. What approaches do you take for that consideration?
Well, me personally, none. I've never made any when I was racing, I never made any changes to anything above the suspension clickers. I can say I don't think I've ever seen anyone take any special consideration for their riding gear other than riding with a rain suit. Typically, the foot pegs are serrated enough that getting wet has no effect on them. If you've found that your foot can slip off a peg in the rain or if it gets wet, then I would look into some more aggressive aftermarket pegs that have some more aggressive teeth on them.
Because I do have one bike that has rubber inserts on the pegs, and that's the one in the rain. I have noticed my foot slip before.
Right.
Nothing ever bad, but I guess that's my primary ride. And when it's raining, I'm more confident on that bike, so I probably tend to go out on my Suzuki SV more than my Daytona 675, which does have serrated pegs. Now that you mention that, I don't think I've ever ridden my Daytona in the rain, but I definitely have on the SV.
Yeah,
so it might be the case that removing the rubber from the pegs alone might solve that problem.
Yes. I had an SV that I rode on track for many, many years. I highly recommend riding those in the rain. They're a very good, solid, reliable, and fun machine. But yeah,
and they
definitely,
crash well.
if you're finding they do, yes. Well, actually, I never crashed mine, but yeah, if you find that your foot is slipping off the pegs, then definitely get some aftermarket serrated, fixed foot pegs. I think you'll find that that will not happen again.
Okay, cool.
Now, Garrett, did I hear a question from someone else?
Yes, that was me. I just have a question about MSR Houston. About your personal worst turn and how you would enter and exit, because I'm looking for tips on that track.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, this applies not just to MSRH, but to any track at all. That's one thing when I'm teaching at Sport Rider Coaching, I want to emphasize that the lessons we teach don't apply just for ECR. They don't just apply for wherever we're at. They apply for every track. And I've had a lot of people come to me and say, look, I really hate this particular corner. What can I do? How can I get that out of my mind? How can I go faster through this one particular corner? And I say, okay, this is the day that you have changed your mind about that corner. It is no longer your worst corner. It is no longer your most hated corner. This is the beginning of the moment where you make that corner your bitch. There's no other word to say it. You have to make a mental decision that it is no longer your worst corner. It is now the one where you can get an advantage over everyone else you're racing against. So it's no longer a liability. It is now your greatest asset because you are better at that corner than everyone else on the track. So having said that, you've now got to make it happen. So the next time you're on the track, get some video, some notes, and write down what you're looking at when you're approaching the corner. Okay, what is your reference point? What are you looking at when you're approaching this corner? For example, my worst corner used to be Little Bandit Crescent. I just could not get it right. So I said, okay, well, I'm sick of this. This is now my best corner on the track. So I had to write down where I'm looking when I'm approaching that corner versus where should I be looking. Where am I applying the brake versus where should I be applying the brake? Where am I applying the throttle versus where should I be applying the throttle? So all you've got to do is understand what needs to be done, and then you need to understand what you're doing, and then understand the difference between the two. So for me, this is what I did. I wrote down, okay, I am looking on this video that I got from my helmet camera. I said, okay, I'm approaching this corner. I'm looking at this point right here because that's what I've just been doing all day. Okay, that's the wrong place to look. I shouldn't be looking here. I should be looking over there. So what I was doing is I was staring at the inside of the corner at the ripple, the candy stripe. And I was looking at that point for too long. So then I realized, okay, I don't need to look at that aim point until I hit it. I need to look at that aim point until I know I'm going to hit it. And then, as soon as I know, I have to take my eyes off that point and put my eyes on the next aim point. There's no need to watch that aim point disappear underneath my front tire, because that is preventing me from applying the gas to reach the next aim point. So I've now identified where I should be looking. I need to establish where I need to be braking. Okay, on the video, this is very familiar. I've just been doing this all day. Where am I applying the brakes? Okay, at this point right here. Why? Because I'm nervous. Why am I nervous? I'm nervous because this is my worst corner. It is no longer your worst corner though. It is now your best corner. This is now your best advantage on the track. So you now know where your brake point should be. You know where your target should be. You know where you should be looking and when. You know when you need to take your eyes off the target and apply them onto the next target. And you know that as soon as that happens, you should be on the gas. And it'll be easy to get on the gas because your eyes are looking down the track. They're looking at the next aim point. They're telling your brain, okay, we've got a lot of asphalt that's free and safe and clear. You won't even have to think about doing the next step because your brain will say, okay, it's safe. And all of a sudden, your wrist is twisting that throttle as far as it possibly can because it can see that there's a lot of safe asphalt up ahead. So those are the key steps. Identify what you're doing, identify what you should be doing, and identify the difference. Next time you're at the track on that particular corner, you're going to focus on this corner. You've identified what you have to do. The first time, the first lap around, warm up, take a couple of laps to warm up, and then you know exactly what you need to do. You know that you need to look at this particular point for your braking marker. Even if it's the wrong braking marker, it's here's a key factor. A bad reference point is better than no reference point. You can always fix a bad reference point. If you don't have one, you cannot fix it. You'll always be lost at sea. Find a reference point, stick to it. If you realize that it's wrong, fix it. If you realize that it's perfect, okay, problem solved. Let's move on to the next challenge. Okay, now the challenge is to where to look. Okay, you know where you should be looking. Where are you looking? Identify the two. If you're not looking where you think you should be, fix it. It will take a conscious effort, but the best way to do that is to slow down. Don't try to ride as fast as you possibly can and fix a mistake at the same time. It's the same as adding brakes and lean. You just cannot do it without bad results. So slow down, identify where you are looking, identify where you should be looking, make the change. Once you establish that habit, there, problem solved. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, the next problem is where to look after you're applying the throttle, or should I say, where to look in order to apply the throttle. That will be the easiest solution. That'll be the easiest thing to fix, because when you change where you're looking, your brain will automatically add gas. All of a sudden, you are getting through that corner quicker than you ever have. Continually practice. Just keep practicing. Disregard the rest of the track. Build up to that one corner where you know that you need to change these habits. The only way to change a habit is through repetition. Practice that corner over and over and over again. Don't try to go fast, try to go smooth. Don't try to be the quickest through that corner yet. Try to be accurate and precise through that corner. The speed will come after the smoothness comes, and the smoothness will come as soon as you've got the confidence. And by applying those lessons, identify what you should be doing, identify what you are doing, and then make the change. Simple as that.
That's a that's a brilliant point, Shaun. And actually, one of the things that Garrett and I have both been kind of struggling with this past year was that, I mean, he's gotten pretty well quick pretty fast. However, there's a lot to be learned, and in all truth, I've taught him everything that I can. And even me riding at MSR, Greg used to be my instructor. He's amazing. He taught me a lot. Greg Abbott, he used to ride with MSR. So when Garrett started getting faster, whether it's wet or whether it's dry, one of the comparisons that I always told him, once you get faster, whether it's riding an Ovale on the go-kart tracks like Speed Sports, or whether it's riding an R3 at Coda, is once you get faster and faster and you establish that rhythm, then you almost get into one of those modes. And the best thing that we can associate with, and I say we, me and Garrett, we like to go shoot. And, if you like to go shoot, if you're a sniper, then your method is scan, find, shoot, move, next. It's you scan, you find, you shoot, and because you should already be thinking 2-3 turns ahead. But that's what we've been working on over the past couple of months, is dissecting those turns and seeing exactly what it is. But at some point, I don't want to do him injustice and get to a point of diminishing returns by overthinking it. So sometimes it helps to hear exactly what you just said. So yeah, no, that's dead on. So thanks.
Great. Glad it helps. The old racer's mantra was what was it? Perfect practice prevents poor performance.
Piss poor performance. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. It's not enough to do it over and over again. You've got to do it right over and over again. And shooting, riding, driving, knitting, there's all sorts of different opinions on what is the best way to do it. And one way to find the right method for you is to, get different inputs, get different opinions from different people, because one technique might work perfectly for one person, but not so well for someone else. So, if you can get multiple inputs, multiple coaching sessions from different coaches, and then find the approach that works best, and then apply it and stick to it. The best thing to do is to be consistent. So practice, practice, practice. Let's see, there was a few years ago, there was an attempt to get some mini racing at a parking lot for a Harley Davidson dealership with cones. If we could get that to happen with the Ovalis, that'd be fantastic, because that would mean you could ride on a weekly basis. But we still haven't been able to make that happen. If you have the opportunity for dirt bikes, that's another alternative that can be really good practice on a regular basis. The lessons applied directly. Being good on a dirt bike automatically makes you really good on asphalt.
That is an excellent point.
Practice.
Yeah, because I mean, when I was first teaching Garrett how to ride, and I showed him techniques, he would compare my techniques, even at a very young age, and he's 14 now. But even at 7, 8, he would say, well, Dad, you're either riding old school or new school, whatever. I was like, well, I don't care. I ride what feels good. So I don't care if I look like a Rossi or a Vinales or a Biaggi or, because sometimes I look crossed up, but it's what's okay, because the feedback on the bike is telling me exactly where the body and the center of balance and the lean angle and the center line needs to be. Where my head needs to be, because I mean, and I may be wrong, but I mean, for me, what works is if my body goes where my head goes, and if my arms or my hands and everything do exactly what my brain tells it. So when I stop thinking, then everything else, I'm leaving it to kinesthetics, which is not a good idea.
Habit, whether it's a good or bad habit. When you're not thinking about what you're doing, you're just doing what your body is comfortable with and it has always done.
Right.
But as far as old school versus new school is concerned, the difference is, think about how tall Marc Marquez is. He's a tiny little dude. Think about even Wayne Rainey or Eddie Lawson or Mick Doohan. Those guys were significantly bigger than Marc Marquez. That's one of the reasons, not just the only, but one of many reasons why their body position and riding style was very different, because they just didn't have the problems with body mass that he has. Even Danny Pedrosa was the worst, because he was so small. He had to overemphasize his body position so much to get the same amount of counterbalance from his torso. So for someone, if I'm coaching and I'm coaching someone who's much smaller, my body position for a given corner speed will be very different to theirs because I've got a much larger counterbalance acting on the inside of the corner than they do. So a smaller person will have to do more body language in order to achieve the same level of traction on the same motorcycle.
That's exactly right. And that's that's one thing I'm very proud of Garrett this past year. What he's learned is intuitively adjusting those body positions, because early on in January of this year, when he was following Cody's lines around, Cody's lines are I mean, now he's following the same lines. However, the body positioning is different, but Cody's a much bigger kid, and they're both riding the Avali 160. Yes. And when Garrett got on at Coda and he was riding with Garrett, I don't think you rode with Chase, but Chase was riding a Ducati 899, I believe. But Garrett was riding the R3, but Chase's body position was a lot different, but that's a bigger bike and Chase is a much bigger kid. So the mass, the inertia, whether it's and Coda was wet that day. It was, it was wet. It scared me to death because it was Garrett's first time at Coda, which is why I'm looking forward to this conversation. Because in retrospect, I'm sitting here looking back and thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I'd known then to tell him, or he'd known, because he probably processes this a lot better than I do, that makes so much more sense for him to just, and he did finally get into the rhythm, because at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, it started drying up. Coda doesn't take long to dry up now. But my gosh, that back straight, or the front straight, whatever it is, turn one was just, it was heart stopping for me watching him fly across on a wet track.
Yeah. But to him, it was fine because he was under control. He was confident.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why they moved him up from levels, because it got to the point where some of those riders at the lower levels it was almost unsafe for him, because when you start second guessing yourself, kind of going back to what you were saying about learning, it gets counterintuitive. And when you counterintuitive, the track is not the place to drawing a map and second guessing things in your mind. Right. So,
Earl, did you have a question or point to raise?
Oh no, I was just saying thank you for dissecting all that. I lowered my hand. Sorry, I was okay. I didn't want to interrupt, but I just interjected myself.
Sure.
Just sharing. I think you guys can see my screen. I'm just sharing one of Garrett's photo. He's doing all right.
Yeah, he's doing all right. No, that's Garrett.
Was that Chase Black you were referring to?
No, that's
earlier?
That's me.
This is Garrett.
But Earl, were you referring to Chase Black earlier?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I did some coaching with him on Coda. There was a lot of fun too. Yeah.
So that's Garrett, and before he got refined, which is what we like to call, Garrett and I affectionately like to call the spider monkey phase. But but his lean angles have improved substantially. But that is Garrett. What was that turn? What at GCK at Katie?
That was the horseshoe turn. So turn 9.
Turn 9. Yeah, and that was 3 months into him.
Fantastic.
That was 3 months into him riding, and so he's gotten a little bit better. So.
Yeah, doesn't it make you sick how quickly kids learn?
Yeah, and how quickly I age.
Yes. So, Claudia, did you want to take us on to any other points?
Sure. I can actually. I looked up just quickly as you were. Garrett asked about MSR, and love the way you've put like the where you look and figure the turnout. So I pulled up one of my videos at MSR where I can speak to the at one point I was looking at the wrong spot. So this is entering the keyhole, right? And play quickly through the video. So when we make that right, the way I used to do, I would be like looking at where I can see like what seems to be like an apexy thing there, and then the bike would go a little bit, and I would be like looking where I could see, right? And a very good friend of mine was following me, a couple of days, and he said, "Well, I can tell you that you are not looking far enough around the keyhole, which is making you feel like unsure going around that corner. Try looking a little bit further." And sure enough, so instead of like at this point, instead of looking like where I can actually see, I move just like a little bit like here. Like I cannot see my way there, but at the speed rate that I'm going, and once I've set right the bars, I will get there. So just keep looking, and sure enough, it's made like that whole corner, because it's a constant radius there, right? So once I found, okay, this is where I have to steer in, and that's how far I can look to make, and actually find that spot, right? Then we have to make that left transition. But that was like a huge thing, because I was so tied up on looking at that thing that I thought it was like an apex type of thing. It's like, oh, that's what I can see right now. And until I've made it to that point, I wouldn't move my, where I'm looking, and just making this change, trusting, oh yeah, you make it, right? Just look a little bit farther down. Right? So yeah, that's as you were explaining that, this one case just came to mind. And then actually another one also on that at MSR is going after, as we exit bus stop. Yeah, like right here, coming out of the bus stop, getting into the sweeper that takes us to the back straights. A lot of folks, they focus on looking at this apex, right? And I've learned to actually look at that tower all the way down there, right? Because as I'm on the gas, I'm moving pretty fast. I will make it to this apex here, and that tower is where I'm gonna go at the end of that straight. And once I've made it there, that's another thing that came with time. Like when I'm here, I know that there's a kink here. And of course, I mean, that's the number one mistake I think that people at MSR, and I've heard that from coaches, is that people start slowing down a lot here. Whereas the fast guys, they all take the inside and they go, because really the slow part where you're braking to, which is into Diamond's Edge, it's that corner back here. So I learned to change my reference points to this tower here. So it's like, okay, that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going to be doing the heavy braking, right? So by the time that we are on this straight here, it's like, yeah, there's a little kink here. I personally do downshift like around here to make that just that little kink, right? But that's where I'm braking to. So when I find that tower, it's like, okay, when I'm lined up, there you go. That's where I'm making the heavy brake, and that's what takes me from this apex here down to that braking zone, heavy braking zone, and then make that shift. So yeah, making these like adjustments and writing down, okay, how did it feel, right? Do I feel like I was looking at the right spot, or did I feel too late moving my reference points like that? So yeah, just adding a little bit to it.
Yep. And that's a very clear benefit that you can get when you're riding. It's the second last corner. I think it's 19. If you treat it like just a slight kink instead of a corner, then you can actually get a lot of much better drive up to the straight. For anyone who's got Coda in their near future, yeah, don't slow down don't brake for turn 19. Just power through it. and treat it like that kink right here at MSRH.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that is a fast one. Oh, the other one at Coda is actually I did share that one. Oh, I think I did. Let's see if I find a turn. Let me see, turn 10, right? Which is the blind. Let's see, I can get this one here. It's a blind left corner going down here that you can really
Yes.
see,
Yes.
right? And if you're looking
Visualize.
for
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. You need to visualize the track. You don't have
Right.
to see it to wait to apply the gas. If you can
Yes.
visualize it and then line yourself up, use your good reference points and accelerate before you see the downhill section, you can make up a lot of time on other bikes.
Yeah, because like right here, when we're not confident, like you get here, you're looking for that apex here, but if you keep waiting until you actually see the apex, it's a little
And
bit
you've
too
waited
late.
too long. Yeah.
Exactly. So eventually,
You should be, you should be hard under acceleration way before you tip over.
exactly. Eventually, I started learning like, okay, instead of looking here, I should be looking down there, where I can actually see turn 11. Right? There's usually that it's either a Geico sign or something else that you can already see, like right there. It's like that's where we're going, so we don't have to keep looking here, right?
Yeah. And the only risk is coming up to slow traffic that hasn't used that technique.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's cool. Yeah, so let's see what else. Guys on the call, anything any other things you guys would like to ask Shaun? You know,
Yeah.
once again, we do get somebody who knows what the heck they're talking about. Let's make sure we use that resource.
Yeah, so I got a question, Claudio. I'm sorry, I wasn't sure if Garrett was talking there.
Oh no, we were. I'm sorry, Michael. We were arguing about him going to take a shower because he had to drop off.
No problem. So the question I wanted to ask is about over or underestimating traction, and we have to be able to be in communication with the bike to get the feedback for the traction that's available. And I'll give you one example that I often mistake what my bike is telling me, and that's when I get on a track in the wet, the speeds are going to be slower. And one of the typical things that I run into is that because the speed is slower, it takes less effort to turn the motorcycle. And because I'm on a track I'm familiar with, but my speed is so much slower and I'm in the wet, often I think that, I put a steering input into the bar and the bike, it steered more quickly than I was expecting it to because my speed's 20 miles an hour slower. And I get the false sense that, there's not enough traction. The bike is starting to slide, when in reality, it's just me not correctly interpreting the feedback I'm getting from the motorcycle. What are some of the things that I might get false indications from? Another one, I'm thinking I'm riding on the track and I'm thinking the motorcycle's losing traction, but it may be because of another reason that I'm getting feedback from the motorcycle, but it's not really feedback that I'm losing traction. So what are some of the false inputs I might get back versus what should I really be feeling for to actually detect that, yes, that's the motorcycle actually sliding in that case?
Sure.
I'm trying to understand what the motorcycle's doing. What should I be looking for?
Well, the first thing you have to do is to identify what a sliding motorcycle does feel like. When I was learning to ride on the street, I was fortunate that I had a long childhood spent riding dirt bikes on my family farm. So I was a lot more comfortable with the sensation of sliding. And I didn't necessarily know that that's what I was actually doing, but it was a case of, okay, this feels different, so I will just my body had already learned how to deal with it. But I wanted to identify those sensations. So what I did is I got into the habit of locking the front. So whether it was, it didn't matter if it was wet or dry, when I was coming into my driveway at the end of every day after riding home, I had a long section of clean, smooth asphalt, and I would lock the front wheel at 10 or 20 miles an hour just to identify what it felt like. So if someone was asking me that question at a day at Sport Rider Coaching, what I would say is, okay, we need to identify what it feels like to slide the front. So there's a large parking lot down at the very bottom of the parking at the track, quite close to the entrance. What I have done in the past is I'll take a student down to that area and I'll stand at the very edge of the asphalt and I'll have them accelerate towards me, and then at a relatively low speed, 20 miles an hour maybe, lock the front, but don't release the brake. Just if you need to, put your both feet down and prepare, lock the front and feel what it's like to slide the front. Okay, you've done it for a 3-foot slide. Okay, turn around, go back, do it at 10 miles an hour faster. Okay, now lock the front brake again. See what it feels like. Understand that locking the front feels like this. It's different to a lack of inertia and gyroscopic inertia in the front wheel. So let's do it again at a slightly faster speed. It doesn't have to be at the track. It could be anywhere that you've got access to a large expanse of asphalt. Let's see, I was riding with Eurosport Cycles a month ago, and my student had never experienced what it was like to lean and then transition. So I went to the skid pan near the 1.3 mile track and literally ran through a few drills with her there. So find a space that's large enough, accelerate in a straight line, and lock the front brake. Now, this exercise is going to be different to the one I mentioned earlier, where we want to experience what it's like to lock the front at 60 miles an hour. In this case, you'll want to lock the front and keep it locked, just so you know what it's like, just so you know what the sensation is like. And then do the same with the rear. Approach on a large expanse of asphalt, build up some speed, and then lock the rear. Just let it slide for 6 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet. But then do it again with a slight amount of lean. Do it at 20 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour, whatever is comfortable for the first time. It'll be pretty slow, but that's good. We want to understand these sensations. 10 miles an hour, lock the rear. Okay, 20 miles an hour, lock the rear. Now, what'll happen is the faster you go, the further out it will step. But then also at the same time, it'll teach you what it feels like, and you will no doubt want to feel what it's like to release the rear brake. Be prepared for a bit of a shock, because when you release that brake, it'll grip again and it'll try to throw you out of the seat. So that's why it's best to do this at a very low speed. Once you've got that understanding of those sensations, then you're good. All you need to do, you just need to give your body a heads up. This is what it feels like when that happens. This is what it feels like when that happens. That's all you need to do. You just need to get familiar with the sensations. And then if you're on the track in the rain and you feel something that you previously were not comfortable with, now you know, okay, that was not a slide. That was just a reduction in inertia in the gyroscope in your front wheel. Okay, we've not approached our traction limits. We can continue to go faster. Keep going faster until you feel that vagueness in the front, in the handlebars, that you can associate with a loss of traction. So an exercise like that can teach you the difference between the two.
Gotcha. Cool. I appreciate the comments on that one.
Hope it helps.
Jesse, are you still on the call? Let me put you on the spot. Any question, man? We've been quiet.
Oh yeah, I had to drop off the call for a second, but I'm not sure if you covered this topic. I did have a question on it. we've been talking about riding in the wet, but I also want to understand if there's any differences between riding on a track that's fully wet and then riding on a track that has wet spots with other spots that have traction. Like, let's say half dry and then half wet.
Sure, absolutely. That's basically the same as a track that has a light dusting of sand in one part and not another. If you can, yeah, absolutely avoid that low traction area, but you might find that you can't do that. So that'll be a case of rapidly adjusting your limits each lap at that point. So we all know what it's like to adjust your limits when you're riding in the rain because, of course, you've got less traction available. So your speeds around the entire lap are lower. If you find that only part of the track is wet, yeah, it's going to be a matter of adjusting your limits on that particular section. I'm trying to think. Typically, what happens is when a track dries, then you'll feel more traction in one section than you will in another. I've personally found that I could judge pretty well what the traction limits were. So I could just naturally feed in more throttle when I could tell that the track was drier, obviously gauging the color of the asphalt. The biggest benefit is to know when or how much you can brake. That previous exercise I just mentioned, where you intentionally lock up the front, is a really good way to gauge how much traction you have available. If you're comfortable with locking up the front, not only at 60 miles an hour for a half a second, but also at a lower speed until you reach a stop, then if something similar to that happens on the track, then you won't freak out. You won't overreact to anything. You won't accidentally or mistakenly do what your natural survival instincts tell you, and that is to grab the front brake. You'll just be able to deal with it naturally. So yeah, if you can, get comfortable with the front brake sliding, and then if you're on a track at a race and half of the track has dried out but the other half has not, then if you do find that you're a little aggressive on the section that is still wet, you'll know how to deal with it, and your body will compensate for the rest. Your body will say, okay, I can see that it's a little darker here. It's obviously a little wetter than it was at the other corner. I'll apply a little bit less brake. But if you're too aggressive and add too much and it does slide, well, you're comfortable with that. Your body understands how to deal with it, and if it does slide, then it'll be no major drama, and you'll be able to continue riding without overreacting, without crashing, and you'll be able to continue.
Cool.
Wow. That was a lot.
Yeah, I definitely like the
What do you think?
approachable strategies to get there.
Yeah, it's not very pleasant to be thrown into the deep end with a 100-pound weight around your ankle. Yeah, that's not a good way to learn how to swim.
Yeah. All it takes is seat time, right? That's it.
But like I said, dirt bikes make a huge difference. If you guys ever get a chance to ride a dirt bike, jump on it. It is so educational. You learn all of these lessons at a very low speed. I can think of times when I've crashed a dirt bike 10 times in one day and never hurt myself or the bike, but learned so much. Actually, I did write a blog about that. I might give it to Claudio to see if he can post it. But I've learned more on one day on a dirt bike than years of racing, because I wasn't afraid to push the limits. I wasn't afraid to overstep those limits. And when I did and crashed, I didn't hurt myself. I crashed, I dusted myself off, and I jumped back on and I kept riding. And I made the same mistake again and again until finally my brain said, oh, hey, if I repeat these same actions, then I'm probably going to get the same result. How about if I try something a little different and see what happens? And sure enough, I learned an enormous amount in a very short time.
You're not helping my garage, man. The last thing I need is another bike, but
Yeah,
it's funny because Yeah, I've been thinking about this for the last year and a half of getting a small dirt bike just for this reason.
Yep. I cannot recommend it highly enough.
Uh-oh, there goes my last garage space.
I've actually got quite a few videos on my YouTube channel of doing grass track racing with a bunch of friends. And that's where we have a road race style track on grass. And the racing, when you get a group of people, gets pretty aggressive. And you do things when you're racing with your friends that you wouldn't normally do. But as a result, you also learn a lot. And it's a lot of fun. It's a really good workout. It's great training. And it's perfect practice for riding on asphalt.
Cool. Well, we just need to get Earl to build a track on his new property there. You still on, Earl?
Yeah,
you listening?
Here we'll all have
I dropped off.
Okay.
Sorry, Jesse, you were saying, man?
I was saying this time next year we'll all have dirt bikes.
Hey, you know, dirt bikes, you can
Instead of with
stick
mini
street
bikes, and
tires
now we're
on them,
gonna do-
take them out.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was so close to picking up Edgar's CRF 150 because it's got off-road wheels and it's got mini bike wheels on it, dual purpose.
It's a great bike.
Yeah, if it weren't for the fact that I know he has had carburetor problems he can't solve, I might have bit that hook.
Wow. Those things have, those carburetors are really cheap to just replace the whole thing. That's the easiest solution to that problem.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Anyway, maybe happening sooner than later.
Go for it.
Doesn't take much.
You won't regret it.
Very cool. All right, guys. Anything else before we wrap things up?
No, I really love this. Thank you so much for Shaun for taking this and especially taking all my questions.
Happy to do it. Hope I can help.
It's rare information. You can talk to people all day long. You go to the track and some people have the experience. And the other thing I've noticed is there are people that know the skills and have mastered the skills, but it's a different thing to be able to communicate that and be an educator. And that's a different set of skills. And when you have someone that has both, that's precious and it's rare. So I really appreciate you putting yourself out here to help us out.
Like I said, I'm just hope I can help. This is, I've spent a lot of time professionally teaching people in IT. So I design computer systems and I teach people how to use them. So that's what I do during the day. And yeah, I've been riding since I was about 7 or 8 years old. And my nephew, I taught him to ride when he was 9 and started racing in 1992 and have been doing track days since 1992. So I'm glad I can share so that other people can avoid the mistakes that I made when I was trying to learn.
Yeah, faster progress, man, and less damaged equipment.
And fewer scars and broken bones.
Yeah,
that's important.
That.
Yes.
Very cool. Well,
awesome. Well, thank you, Claudio and Shaun, for putting this together this month. This was a real treat this month, I got to say.
Yes, thank you, Claudio.
Absolutely. Very cool. Excellent.
And,
well, thanks. Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Michael.
I was gonna say, Shaun, hopefully I'll see you at ECR. I've since COVID started, I've had to cancel 3 times. So.
Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, the last time it was my fault when I fractured my shoulder a week before, so that wasn't going to happen. So
yeah, that'll do it. Well,
anyway,
I'll be there. I'll probably be there this weekend.
Oh, nice.
Well, I'm shooting for Jim to get some dates posted for after Christmas. So we'll see. It may be a while after Christmas would be my guess.
Right. Yep, I will very likely be there at that time.
Awesome. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, guys. You all have a nice one. Enjoy the weekend.
Okay. Thanks, Claudio. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Claudio. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.